Bigger is always better, right? Well, not necessarily. Sometimes you need the right tool for the job, and sometimes the right tool is much smaller than you'd expect. You might be surprised at the solutions the military has sometimes turned to, though, with the smallest weapons in the world. Smallest guided missile. American infantry often faces many threats on the battlefield, but in modern war, that battlefield is all too often in the middle of a crowded city. Faced with the consequences of extreme collateral damage, in 2006 the U.S. Army tested out a 25-inch long guided missile nicknamed the Spike, the smallest guided missile ever created. This tiny package packed a considerable explosive wallop, and while its 5.3-pound warhead wouldn't do much against a thickly armored vehicle, it had more than enough punch to take out everything from boats to helicopters and even light armored vehicles. The missile achieved its destructive potential by focusing its explosive energy forward rather than outward, greatly limiting collateral damage. Made cheaply with off-the-shelf components, it came in at an extremely modest price tag of $5,000, compared to a whopping $93,000 for its bigger brother, the TOW anti-tank missile. Spike missiles are great for taking out trucks, but what if your personal protection needs aren't as extreme? Smallest pistol. German for hummingbird, the Colibri pistol lives up to its inspirational name. Chambered for a tiny 2.7mm centerfire cartridge, the Colibri measured just over 2 inches and weighed in at just 8 ounces. The tiny pistol fired a 3-grain bullet at 650 feet per second, and at extremely close ranges it could still be lethal. The Colibri was manufactured between 1910 and 1914, when Germany switched to a war footing and more serious weapons of war became the country's chief concern. Never meant to be a battlefield weapon, the Colibri was more of a novelty and meant for use to defend oneself against stray dogs, scaring away the animal without seriously injuring it and without making a ruckus of a larger firearm. Given that Germany had an entire small arms industry, literally in this case, dedicated to protecting oneself from stray animals, we can't help but wonder what kind of dystopian Zootopia-type world Germans were living in at the turn of the 19th century. Not ones to be outdone by their German neighbors, the Swiss invented the Swiss minigun in the 2000s, giving modern functionality to a miniature firearm. Measuring just 2.2 inches and far from lethal, the gun could still be dangerous at close ranges. Interestingly enough, the firearm is too small for U.S. import restrictions, so you won't find one of these miniguns in a U.S. public school, aka firing range. Smallest jet fighter. Fighter planes have always had one huge limitation: their fuel capacity. During World War II, lackluster fuel capacity in Allied fighters led to bomber crews flying unescorted into the teeth of the Luftwaffe, suffering horrific casualties. To increase their flight ranges, most fighters will carry drop tanks, but those external fuel tanks seriously add to a fighter's radar cross-section and makes their detection easier from even greater distances. Even with drop tanks, though, Cold War fighters couldn't hope to keep up with the long-range bombers the US might need to send deep into Soviet territory. And that's when the US military came up with a solution. What if bombers carried their own fighter protection with them? First flying in 1948, the XF-85 Goblin Parasite fighter is by far one of the weirdest weapons ever developed. The plane was carried under the wings of a larger bomber, with plans to carry as many as 4 of these tiny aircraft, and was deployed using a mechanical trapeze. After fighting off enemy fighters, the Goblin would then simply reattach itself using a large hook and be hauled back up under the wing of the bomber. Surprisingly, the Goblin was an extremely agile and capable fighter aircraft, but given its tiny size, it would be buffeted wildly by the bomber's turbulence. Out of the 7 test flights, the Goblin only successfully reconnected with its mother bomber 3 times, proving that the concept was simply too difficult to make a reality. The very next year, the US military perfected an aerial refueling tanker, solving the problem of ferrying fighter craft long distances, and the Goblin was cancelled. However, in modern times, a new version of this concept is being tested by the US military, as the Air Force conducts secret tests of an aerial system meant to carry a squadron of drone reconnaissance and fighter aircraft on board. These drones would be released to conduct their mission and then fly back to the mothership and be recaptured. While the details are scarce, all accounts indicate that test flights are going quite well. Smallest tank. World War II had its share of tiny tanks, but in the modern age, the smallest tank in the world is so tiny it can only fit 1 occupant. The PAV Badger holds the official world record for smallest tank in the world. Capable of withstanding 50 caliber rounds and small explosives, the Badger may be tiny, just over a foot across, and weighing less than a 4-door sedan, but the Badger is meant for one thing and one thing only: to be a battering ram. Meant for use by SWAT teams, the Badger solves the problem of exposing an officer to hostile fire on first making an entry into a building. While not usable in all situations, the Badger can be operated by a single officer who can smash his way through about just any doorway that might be barring entry and be completely safe while doing so. With a price tag of $2 million though, the Badger may be tiny but packs one hell of a punch in your wallet. Smallest grenade. The V40 mini grenade may have been small, but you wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of it. Meant to be carried in large numbers, the V40 was strikingly different from the modern American M67 fragmentation grenade. For comparison, the V40 weighed just under 5 ounces, while the M67 comes in at 14 ounces. The grenade is 2.6 inches long and has a diameter of 1.6 inches versus the M67 at a length of 3.53 inches and a diameter of 2.5 inches. The V40 was considered lethal at 16 feet, much like its M67 cousin, but given its smaller explosive charge outside of the 5-meter range, its lethality quickly fell off. The grenade saw widespread use with both the Canadian and US forces and was meant to provide soldiers with a greater amount of explosive firepower by giving them the ability to carry more grenades than normal. However, the weapon was considered dangerous to use while wearing gloves, as the distinct impact of a striker hitting the primer on a regular grenade was much harder to feel with the smaller body of the V40. Smallest nuclear weapon. During the Cold War, the US had one very serious problem. It was hopelessly outgunned by the Soviet military and the hordes of tanks operated by its allies. While America retained the technological advantage, Stalin's adage of quantity is a quality all its own proved true on the potential battlefields of Europe. Something was needed to level the playing field. Tactical nuclear weapons could help keep hordes of Soviet tanks at bay, but as time passed, the Soviets invested heavily in anti-air defenses until even approaching a battlefield would be suicidal for NATO aircraft. Something else was needed. Smaller than a strategic weapon capable of wiping out cities, with a yield that could be adjusted to take out columns of enemy tanks instead of the entire countryside. Enter the man-portable W-54, known as the Davy Crockett. Built in 1961 and in service for a full decade, the Davy Crockett was meant to give U.S. infantry a variable-yield man-portable nuclear weapon to use against rampaging hordes of Soviet tanks. The explosive warhead weighed around 50 pounds and had a yield of 10 to 20 tons of TNT. Later evolutions of the weapon, such as the W-72, increased the yield up to 600 tons of TNT, at which point we're not sure what the point is in not using regular nukes anymore. Eventually, the Davy Crockett and similar special automatic demolition munitions were struck from the inventory, probably because soldiers carrying around nukes they could fire at their own discretion was always a terrible idea to begin with. Now go check out weirdest weapons in the world, or click this other video instead.